The snow fell heavily across Moscow as the Kremlin lights blazed late into the night. Inside, President Vladimir Putin sat alone in his office, reviewing classified intelligence reports. The latest satellite images showed something that made his blood run cold. Russia's most advanced prototype weapon system, the Poseidon X hypersonic drone submarine, had disappeared from its testing facility in the Arctic Circle. "Bring me General Sokolov," Putin ordered through the secure intercom. Within minutes, the head of Russia's Special Operations Forces stood before him, ramrod straight in his uniform despite the late hour. "The Americans?" Putin asked, his voice eerily calm. "We don't think so, Mr. President," replied Sokolov, his weathered face betraying concern. "No US or NATO vessels were detected in the area. The security footage shows an internal breach. Someone with clearance disabled the tracking systems 3 hours before the extraction." Putin's eyes narrowed. "The Chinese, then? Possibly. Or private interests. The technology would be worth billions on the black market." The president stood and walked to the window, watching the snow-blanket red square. The Poseidon X represented 5 years of cutting-edge Russian military development, a fully autonomous underwater drone capable of evading all known detection systems, armed with a new type of warhead that could neutralize an aircraft carrier battle group without triggering nuclear protocols. In the wrong hands, it could shift the balance of global naval power overnight. "How many people know about this breach?" Putin asked. 7, including us, Sokolov answered. "Keep it that way." Putin turned from the window. "Assemble Unit 29,155. I want our best operators. They deploy in 6 hours." General Sokolov nodded grimly. Unit 29,155 was the Kremlin's most secretive special forces team, comprised of veterans from Russia's most difficult military campaigns. Their existence was officially denied, their operations never acknowledged. They specialized in the impossible. By dawn, 12 men gathered at a military airfield outside Moscow. Their commander, Colonel Alexei Petrov, had been pulled from his bed at 3 a.m. with urgent orders directly from the Kremlin. A decorated veteran of operations in Syria, Ukraine, and places no one ever spoke about, Petrov was known for his uncompromising efficiency and absolute loyalty. The briefing was concise. The Poseidon X prototype had been stolen from its testing facility near Severomorsk. Intelligence suggested it was being transported by a modified civilian cargo vessel currently navigating through international waters in the Norwegian Sea, heading south. Their mission was simple: board the vessel, secure the prototype, eliminate any resistance, and return the technology to Russian soil. The operation was completely deniable. If captured, Russia would disavow all knowledge of their actions. "Our window is closing," Petrov told his men as they studied satellite imagery of the target vessel. "The ship will reach British territorial waters in 36 hours. After that, recovery becomes diplomatically complicated." The team included specialists in maritime operations, electronic warfare, demolitions, and close-quarters combat. Among them was Dmitry Volkov, a former naval intelligence officer with intimate knowledge of the Poseidon X system. "The prototype has fail-safe protocols," Volkov explained. "If tampered with incorrectly, it will self-destruct. We need to secure it intact." Their Mi-8 helicopter took off in the early morning darkness, flying low over the Russian countryside before meeting a naval aviation unit over the Barents Sea. They would perform a high-altitude insertion over international waters, using halo high-altitude, low-opening parachute techniques to land precisely on the moving vessel without detection. As the aircraft reached cruising altitude, Putin was receiving another briefing in the Kremlin's Situation Room. FSB Director Alexei Petrov had concerning news. "Mr. President, we've identified the likely culprit, Patrushev said, sliding a dossier across the table. Mikhail Kovalev, former GRU officer, discharged 3 years ago after expressing political disagreements with current leadership. Putin opened the file, studying the photograph of a stern-faced man in his 40s. He maintained connections with several oligarchs currently residing abroad, Patrushev continued, including Dmitry Leonidov. The president's expression darkened. Leonidov had once been among Russia's wealthiest men, part of Putin's inner circle, until he fled to London after falling out of favor. Now he used his billions to fund opposition movements and what the Kremlin considered anti-Russian activities. So this is not just theft, Putin said. It's betrayal. We believe Kovalev assembled a team of former military specialists. The plan appears to be delivering the Poseidon X to a private research facility in Gibraltar, where it can be reverse-engineered and its technology sold to the highest bidder. Putin's voice was ice. Ensure Colonel Petrov understands, this is no longer just about recovering state property. This is about making an example. High above the Norwegian Sea, Unit 29155 prepared for their jump. The sea below was rough, whitecaps visible even from their altitude. The cargo vessel, supposedly carrying timber products from Finland to Portugal, was a small dot on the dark water. Oxygen masks on, Petrov ordered. Communications check. Each man acknowledged, voices crackling through their secure radio system. Remember, Petrov said finally, minimal casualties among the crew. We want the thieves and the device. The regular sailors are likely uninformed hired hands. The rear door of the aircraft opened, howling wind whipping through the cabin. One by one, the operatives jumped into the darkness, their black tactical gear making them nearly invisible against the night sky. They fell in formation, tracking the vessel through night vision goggles. At the last possible moment, they deployed their chutes, controlling their descent to land silently on different parts of the ship. Petrov and 3 others landed on the main deck, while the rest secured the bow and stern. Within seconds, they had disabled the ship's external communications and surveillance systems. Moving with practiced precision, they began systematically clearing the vessel, starting with the bridge. The captain and 3 crew members were secured without resistance, genuinely shocked by the armed men who appeared seemingly from nowhere. "Where is the special cargo?" Petrov demanded in English. The captain, a middle-aged Greek man, shook his head in confusion. "We carry only lumber and machine parts." "The container that was loaded at your last port of call," Petrov pressed. "The one not on your manifest." Recognition flickered across the captain's face, followed by fear. "Lower deck. Aft cargo hold. They paid triple rate, said it was scientific equipment." Petrov left 2 men to guard the bridge and proceeded with the rest of his team toward the cargo hold. As they descended into the bowels of the ship, Volkov's radiation detector began to register low-level readings, consistent with the Poseidon X's power source. "We're close," he whispered. The team approached the cargo hold cautiously, thermal imaging showing 8 heat signatures inside. 4 were clustered around what appeared to be the stolen prototype, while the others were positioned defensively around the space. "They've set up a perimeter," Petrov observed. "Professional configuration." Volkov studied his tablet displaying the thermal feed. "They're working on it, probably trying to disable the tracking and security systems before they reach port." Petrov made rapid hand signals, and his team split into 3 elements. They would breach simultaneously from multiple entry points, using flashbangs and non-lethal methods initially to avoid damage to the prototype. What happened next shook the Russian operation to its core. As they prepared to breach, alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. Someone had detected their presence and triggered the vessel's security system. The element of surprise was lost. "Execute now," Petrov commanded. The team blew the doors and rushed into the cargo hold, only to be met with a precisely coordinated defensive response. These were no ordinary thieves. They moved with military discipline, using advanced tactics that mirrored the Russians' own training. A fierce firefight erupted in the confined space. 2 of Petrov's men went down immediately, hit by precision fire from defenders using sound suppressors and thermal optics. Through the chaos, Petrov caught a glimpse of the Poseidon X prototype, partially disassembled on a workbench, surrounded by sophisticated diagnostic equipment. And standing over it was a face he recognized instantly from their briefing, Mikhail Kovalev. Their eyes met across the cargo hold for a fraction of a second. Then Kovalev smiled coldly and pressed a device in his hand. "Bomb!" Volkov shouted, diving for cover. The explosion that followed wasn't what they expected. Instead of a devastating blast, an intense electromagnetic pulse ripped through the ship, frying all electronic equipment. Lights failed, communications went dead, and the vessel itself began to lose power. In the darkness and confusion, Petrov heard the unmistakable sound of an inflatable boat being deployed. By the time his team had regained their bearings and switched to backup equipment, Kovalev and several of his men had escaped the vessel, taking crucial components of the Poseidon X with them. What remained on the workbench was the prototype's hull and propulsion system, valuable, but useless without the guidance system and warhead that had been removed. "Secure what's left," Petrov ordered grimly, applying a field dressing to a shrapnel wound on his arm. "And find me a working radio." Back in Moscow, Putin received the news with cold fury. The operation had been compromised before it even began. Someone had warned Kovalev's team. "We have a leak," he told his Security Council, his voice dangerously calm. "Find it. The Naval Recovery Team will reach the vessel in 4 hours, Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu reported. "We'll secure what remains of the prototype." "Not good enough," Putin replied. "The most valuable components are now in the hands of traitors." "Where are they heading?" Intelligence Chief Patrushev consulted his tablet. "Our best assessment is a private facility in northern Norway. Satellite imagery shows increased activity at an oceanographic research center owned by a shell company we believe is connected to Leonidov." Putin's decision was immediate. Redirect Unit 29155. Colonel Petrov will take his remaining operational men and continue the pursuit. The Norwegian facility must be secured, and the stolen components recovered. He paused, then added with chilling finality, "No witnesses." The implications were clear to everyone in the room. Russia was authorizing a covert military operation on the soil of a NATO country. If discovered, the diplomatic backlash would be severe, possibly even triggering Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. But the alternative, allowing Russia's most advanced weapons technology to fall into private hands, was unacceptable. For Petrov and his surviving team members, there was no time to rest. After a brief medical treatment aboard the Russian naval vessel that intercepted them, they were transferred to a nondescript fishing boat that would take them to the Norwegian coast. "The intelligence is solid," Petrov told his men as they studied satellite images of their target. "The facility is disguised as a marine research center, but it's actually a sophisticated private laboratory. Security includes approximately 20 personnel, mostly former military contractors." Volkov, whose expertise on the Poseidon X made him essential to the mission despite a bullet grazed to his shoulder, pointed out the facility's vulnerabilities. "Their power system is their weak point. Take that out, and their backup generators will only support minimal security systems." The weather was on their side. A winter storm was intensifying across northern Norway, providing natural cover for their infiltration. They would approach on foot through the forests, using the harsh conditions to mask their heat signatures from thermal sensors. Meanwhile, in a sterile laboratory inside the Norwegian facility, Mikhail Kovalev watched as technicians carefully examined the components they had salvaged from the Poseidon X. "How long until you can bypass the security protocols?" he asked the lead technician, a former Israeli defense contractor. 12 hours, minimum, the man replied. "The encryption is impressive." Kovalev frowned. "You have 6. Our employer is expecting results." "Speaking of our employer," said a tall, silver-haired man entering the room. Viktor Renkov had been Kovalev's commander in the GRU years ago, before both had become disillusioned with the Kremlin's leadership. Now he served as Leonidov's head of security. "He's concerned about the confrontation on the ship. The Russians responded too quickly." "Someone in our original team must have talked," Kovalev replied. "But it changes nothing. Once we crack the guidance system, we'll have what we need. The rest of the prototype is just hardware." Renkov looked skeptical. "Leonidov is worried the Kremlin won't stop. This technology represents Putin's vision for Russia's naval superiority. He'll burn down the world to get it back." "Let him try," Kovalev smiled thinly. "We're in Norway now. Even Putin wouldn't dare launch an operation on NATO soil." As night fell and the storm intensified, Petrov's team approached the facility's perimeter. The wind howled around them, driving snow, reducing visibility to mere meters. Perfect conditions for what they had planned. The facility was built into the side of a coastal cliff, with a helicopter pad on one side and a small private dock on the other. Security was as expected: motion sensors, cameras, armed patrols, but all hampered by the deteriorating weather conditions. Volkov and the team's electronics specialist worked quickly to create a diversion, hacking into the facility's perimeter sensors to trigger false alarms on the opposite side from their approach. As guards mobilized to investigate, Petrov led the main assault team to the service entrance. They breached the door with minimal noise, using specialized tools to defeat the electronic lock. Once inside, they moved with practiced efficiency through the utility corridors, eliminating security personnel with silenced weapons when necessary. In the main laboratory, alarms suddenly blared. "We have a perimeter breach," a security officer reported, monitoring screens showing multiple sensor activations. "Probably just the storm again," another guard replied, dismissing the warning. Kovalev wasn't convinced. He had spent too many years in Russian special operations to ignore his instincts. "Lock down the lab," he ordered. "Move the components to the secondary location." Before his orders could be carried out, the facility's main power failed, plunging everything into darkness for the 3 seconds before emergency lighting activated. "That's not the storm," Renkov said grimly, drawing his sidearm. Kovalev nodded. "Spetsnaz. Has to be." He turned to the technicians. "Pack everything. Now." But it was already too late. The laboratory doors burst open, and Petrov's team flowed in with military precision, neutralizing the unprepared security personnel before they could effectively respond. Kovalev and Renkov took cover behind heavy equipment, returning fire as technicians scattered. In the chaotic exchange, bullets struck sensitive equipment, including the workstation where the Poseidon X's guidance system was being analyzed. "The prototype," Volkov shouted, seeing components being damaged. Petrov made a split-second decision. "Gas," he ordered, and his men deployed specialized non-lethal agents designed to rapidly incapacitate without causing permanent harm. Within seconds, everyone in the lab without protective gear began losing consciousness. Kovalev, recognizing what was happening, made a desperate move. He grabbed what appeared to be the central processing unit of the Poseidon X's guidance system and staggered toward an emergency exit, holding his breath. Petrov spotted him and gave pursuit, following the former GRU officer through a series of corridors toward what facility blueprints had shown to be a secondary helipad on the cliff edge. Outside, the storm had reached its peak. Hurricane-force winds and driving snow created near-zero visibility. Kovalev stumbled onto the helipad, clutching the stolen component, only to find no helicopter waiting. The weather had prevented any evacuation flight. He turned to find Petrov emerging from the facility, weapon raised. "It's over, Mikhail," Petrov called over the howling wind. "Hand over the system." Kovalev laughed bitterly. "You don't understand what you're fighting for anymore, Alexei. Russia has changed. The men we serve are not the patriots we once believed." "I serve Russia," Petrov replied steadily. "Not ideologies, not individual men. Return what you've stolen." For a moment, it seemed Kovalev might comply. Then, with surprising speed, he drew a concealed weapon. Petrov fired first, his shot striking Kovalev in the chest. The former GRU officer collapsed, the Poseidon X component skidding across the helipad toward the cliff edge. Petrov dove for it, catching the device mere centimeters from the precipice. Below, icy waves crashed against jagged rocks hundreds of meters down. As he secured the component, Petrov knelt beside the dying Kovalev. "Leonidov," Kovalev gasped, blood staining his lips. "This was just one project. He has others, deeper infiltration than you can imagine." "Where is he?" Petrov demanded. Kovalev's eyes were growing distant. "Not just about money, about changing Russia's future." His voice faded as life left him. Inside the facility, Petrov's team had secured the remaining components and all research data. The surviving technicians and security personnel were bound and awaiting interrogation. The operation was, technically, a success. But as Petrov reported back to Moscow, he couldn't shake Kovalev's final words. What did he mean about deeper infiltration? What other projects did Leonidov have in motion? In the Kremlin, Putin received the news of the successful recovery with visible relief. "All components secured," he confirmed. "Yes, Mr. President," General Sokolov replied. "Colonel Petrov reports minimal damage to the guidance system. Our engineers believe it can be fully restored." "And the facility?" "Clean operation. Norwegian authorities currently believe it was an industrial accident, a gas leak and explosion with no survivors. By the time they complete their investigation, all evidence of our involvement will have deteriorated beyond recognition." Putin nodded approvingly. "Ensure Unit 29155 receives appropriate recognition, discreetly, of course." "And Colonel Petrov?" "Requesting immediate debriefing, sir. He reports that Kovalev made statements before dying suggesting broader security concerns." The president's expression hardened. "Bring him directly to me when he returns. No intermediate debriefing." 3 days later, Colonel Petrov stood in Putin's private office in the Kremlin, still showing signs of the difficult operation, a fresh scar on his face, his arm in a sling beneath his uniform. "You've done Russia a great service," Putin said, pouring 2 glasses of vodka and offering one to the colonel. "The Poseidon X program continues, thanks to your team's actions." "Thank you, Mr. President," Petrov replied formally, accepting the drink. "Now tell me," Putin continued, his voice sharpening. "These statements Kovalev made, leave nothing out." Petrov recounted the dying man's final words exactly, including the implications of deeper infiltration and other projects. Putin listened intently, then walked to the window, looking out over Moscow. "Colonel, what I am about to tell you does not leave this room." He turned to face Petrov directly. The Poseidon X theft was not an isolated incident. In the past 6 months, We have detected 3 other attempts to compromise advanced military programs. 2 were stopped before they succeeded. And the third? Petrov asked. Still ongoing, Putin replied grimly. Which is why your next assignment begins immediately. He handed Petrov a sealed folder with the highest security classification. Leonidov is merely a financier, Putin continued. We believe he is working with elements within our own government, a coalition of interests who feel Russia should take a different path. They have been placing operatives in sensitive positions for years, building towards some larger objective. A coup? Petrov asked bluntly. Perhaps. Or something more subtle. The systematic undermining of Russia's strategic capabilities, creating vulnerabilities that could be exploited in a crisis. Petrov absorbed this, his face revealing nothing. My orders, sir. You will form a new team, operating outside normal command structures, reporting directly to me. Your mission is to identify the network Leonidov has built within our military and intelligence services, determine their ultimate objective, and eliminate the threat. Putin's eyes were cold steel. Whatever resources you require will be provided. Whatever methods you deem necessary are authorized. The implications were clear. Petrov was being tasked with hunting traitors in the highest levels of Russian power, a dangerous assignment that would make him both hunter and potential target. One question, Mr. President. Petrov maintained his diplomatic demeanor. If there was an incident at some research facility in Kazakhstan, that's a matter between Washington and Astana. Moscow has nothing to do with it. He paused. Though one might ask what sort of research the United States was conducting in Central Asia, so far from its own borders, without public disclosure. The message was delivered to Putin within the hour. The Americans were angry but had stopped short of making public accusations, which confirmed that they lacked actionable evidence of Russian involvement. More importantly, they had tacitly acknowledged the nature of the quantum project by not denying Sullivan's reference to it. Putin summoned Tokayev to an emergency virtual meeting later that day. The Kazakh president looked tired and stressed, the strain of being caught between 2 superpowers evident on his face. I've just had a rather interesting conversation with President Jensen, Putin began. It seems there was some unfortunate incident at a research facility near Almaty. Something about American quantum computing equipment being damaged. Tokayev's jaw tightened. Mr. President, we both know what happened. The question is, where do we go from here? Putin's expression remained neutral. Where we go, Kasim Jomart Kemalevich, is back to the principles of our strategic partnership. Russia respects Kazakhstan's sovereignty, but Kazakhstan must respect Russia's security concerns. He leaned closer to the camera. No more secret American military technology on our borders. No more attempts to play Moscow against Washington. Is that understood? The Kazakh president hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. The research project will be discontinued. The Americans are already withdrawing their personnel. A wise decision, Putin said. Now we can return our attention to more productive matters, like expanding trade between our nations and preparing for the upcoming Eurasian Economic Union Summit. The conversation ended cordially, but both men understood that their relationship had fundamentally changed. Tokayev had tested the limits of Russian tolerance and discovered they were exactly where Putin had always said they were. In Washington, President Jensen convened his National Security Council to discuss options for response. The sabotage of the quantum computing project represented a significant intelligence and technological setback.